As photographers, we know that the eyes are of critical importance to our portraits. As a viewer, your attention will be on the eyes first, then you explore the rest of the image. In normal conversation, we normally look at a person's eyes to communicate those emotions and those feelings of what the conversation is all about. Eyes can add impact to an image, they can add subtlety, they can convey emotions and feelings, so much more than we give them credit for. Eyes are really important. And we as photographers can manipulate how a viewer sees our image or our portrait by using those eyes. That's what this video is all about. Now, if there are no eyes showing in an image, it becomes a generic person. That subject doesn't have personality. It becomes a generic figure, which is fine if that's what we want to communicate with our image. Our subject can have closed eyes. They can be looking away. They can have sunglasses on, or they can have their eyes covered in some way. But generally speaking, we have eyes visible in an image, and that allows us to communicate so much more with our portraits. Now, with any conversation about portraits, particularly photographic portraits, we need to start with a discussion about the purpose of the shoot. What are we trying to communicate with this image? Are we trying to communicate the beauty of the sitter? Are we trying to communicate the strength or the power of our subject? There's a whole range of different things we need to think about before we decide on the other things, like the lighting, the expression, the cropping, all of those sorts of things. Now, I'm not a big fan of the 1, 2, 3 timing shoot thing. I generally don't stand there and go, ready, 1, 2, 3, click. Because that tends to give me very generic, staid sort of expressions. I would much rather time my image to coincide with those eyes being in the way that I want them to be. I may not always be able to achieve that, but that's my aim. So I try to talk to my subject. I try to elicit particular expressions from them. The way that I do that is that I ask them to think of a particular situation in their life that makes them happy or confident or maybe uncertain. Things like that. It's the 4 inches behind the eyes, what they're thinking in their brain, that really determines what those eyes look like and how they communicate that emotion to the camera. Now, as I say, this is a perfect world I'm talking about. It doesn't always happen. But when it does happen, it really lifts the quality of my images. Another opinion of mine is that I much rather have large pupils in the eyes than have very small pupils with a lot of colour. I see photographers say, well, I use these bright lights because it reduces the pupil size and it makes the colour of the eye stand out. I'm not a big fan of that. The large pupils in an image gives you a feeling of more passion from that person, more emotion, more a feeling of friendliness, of attractiveness in the eyes. That's why I tend to prefer close-up portraits in the studio, where the environment's dark or reasonably dark, so that those pupils can dilate a bit, and then when the flash fires, we get those larger pupils in the image. When we're shooting outdoors in the bright light, or we're shooting with constant light that's quite bright, those pupils contract a lot, and we don't get that same sort of feeling in those eyes. It doesn't look quite as attractive. So that's just a personal thing, but you can think about your own feelings on that point. I'm also not a fan of the schmeising or the squinch. If you're not sure what a schmeising or squinch is, it's that technique where photographers ask a client to slightly squint their eyes a little bit. It's supposed to make them look a bit more natural and a bit more genuine, I suppose. But I mean, I don't want eyes to be like this, wide open. I want them to be normal. I want them to be relaxed. I want them to be the way their friends and family know them. Squinching your eyes up like this can make somebody look different. It can give a feeling of mistrust sometimes, maybe a feeling of superiority, looking down on people. I don't know, that's just the way that I feel. So I would much rather have the eyes natural and have that person look the way that their friends, family and loved ones know them. A technique that I use quite a lot and this is something that I've never seen anybody talk about before, is the focus point of the viewer onto the camera. We often ask our viewers to look at the lens, and that's most of my shots are with the eyes straight down the camera. But when someone looks at the lens, they tend to focus on the front element of the lens, which is about 3 or 4 inches in front of the sensor, depending on your lens. Now that can give the impression of somebody talking to you, but focusing just in front of your face. It doesn't give a really authentic look, I find. I would much rather coach my client, if I think that they're up to it, to look through the lens and focus at a point further back in the camera, where the sensor might be, or where the nodal point of the lens might be. That to me gives me more piercing eyes, eyes that will follow the viewer around the room, like the Mona Lisa. But I find that works, and the difference between the two is very subtle, but you'll see a lot of shots during this video where I've done that and the subject has used that technique and it's made a big difference. Like I said before, I like to elicit natural expressions through those eyes. And I do that by asking the viewer to imagine themselves in particular situations. I don't go down to a very precise scenario. I just say, think of something that makes you happy. Think of something that makes you proud. If they've got a friend in the studio, I'll say, just think of something that she does that's really stupid. And they get that little smile, that genuine smile on their face, on their eyes, and that makes the difference. If I'm shooting a CEO or a politician, I'll get them to think about something that they've done that they're really proud of, or some time when they were very confident in what they were doing. That gives us that expression. That's what we're looking for. That's the purpose of the shoot, to show that person in that particular way. Of course, to use those eyes in our image, we need to light them properly. Now, there are various different ways that we can light someone and show those eyes off. I tend to do a lot of beauty shots, so my lighting tends to be fairly frontal. But I do quite a lot of character shots as well, where that light is a little bit off to the side. I don't want to lift my light up too high. I see so many photographers talking about a light that's 45 degrees up. Now that to me is way too high. The higher the light goes, the darker your subject's eyes are going to be in the image. So 45 degrees to me is way too high. For someone like me who's got reasonably deep eye sockets, that 45-degree angle is going to darken my eyes right down. So it's going to make me look a bit shifty and a bit untrustworthy, and it's going to lose all that personality in my eyes. My lights are generally a maximum of maybe 30 degrees above the subject's eye level. Maybe even less, 10 degrees, 15 degrees, because that's going to give me good light in those eyes, and I'm going to be able to portray those expressions so much better. I also see photographers talk about catch lights in the eyes. Now, catch lights are those little white spots that we get in our eyes, which is a reflection of the environment that we're shooting in. Catch lights are important because they do attract attention to the eyes. They make the eyes sparkle. How many catch lights you have in your eyes is up to you. Some photographers like one, some photographers like a few, others like round ones instead of square ones. I don't think it really makes a lot of difference. But those catch lights can tell you a lot about the lighting that the photographer's used. You can learn a lot as a photographer by looking at close-up images and look at those catch lights to see where the photographer has placed his lights. You'll see in these images, you can see that some of these images I've used square soft boxes side by side and shot through the middle. Others I've used a large soft box that is reflected in the eye as a circle. Some others will have a reflector down below as well. We've got the main light up above and we've got a reflector below. You can learn a lot by looking at those catch lights in the eyes of photographs. Even movies and TV shows. You can have a look at those catch lights and see the sort of lighting that they've used. I've also seen photographers say that they light subjects in a particular way because they like the catch light to be in the upper right or the upper left of the eye. To me, that's got the horse before the cart. Or the cart before the horse, actually. Catch lights should be a consequence of the good lighting you've used in your image. You shouldn't place a light just because the catch light looks good here or there. Lighting the face is the ultimate purpose of your lighting situation, whether you're using natural light, constant light, or flash. So those catch lights will be a consequence of the light you use, not the reason to place lights in a particular spot. Eyes are a shiny surface. just like glassware or polished metal. They will reflect their environment. They're like a mirror of the environment. Because they are convex, then they tend to distort that environment a little bit. You can see in these outdoor portraits that the environment is reflected in the eyes of the subject. I've zoomed in close here to show you some of these things. Now, a lot of these images are reduced size for social media, so they're not particularly perfectly sharp, but you can see the reflections in those eyes, and it shows the environment around. You can even see the photographer, me, standing there in quite a few of these shots. Have a look at this shot of sunglasses that we did. We did a sunglasses shoot recently, and I manipulated the reflection in those sunglasses to show my lighting, my large softbox, and me standing in front. Now, it's not actually me, it's my assistant holding that camera, but I thought we'd use him because he's a little bit more attractive than I am. Interestingly, young children's eyes are very smooth. They're so much more smooth than adult eyes. So the reflections in young children's eyes can be very precise. You can see the different colours in the trees in the background. You can see things that are quite a long way away, particularly with children with darker eyes, because that reflection is a bit more prominent with dark brown eyes. But I've shot images before on people's verandas, a young child, 3 or 4 years old, and you can see everything in the background. You can see the railing on the veranda, you could see her mum leaning against the rails, you could see all of the trees in the background with various different colours. It's amazing what you can see in those catch lights. Of course, because these eyes are so important, we need to make sure that our focus is spot on those eyes. When the focus isn't quite on those eyes, the picture doesn't quite work as well. So focus on those eyes. Use your eye autofocus. I don't have that on my camera, so I use a spot focus technique, but I make sure that those eyes are the sharpest part of the image. Now, if you've got one eye closer to the camera, so if your subject is turned but still looking at the camera, focus on the front eye. The front eye is the important one. If the back eye is sharp and the front one's not, it doesn't look as good. So concentrate on getting that focus right. When you're shooting adults, particularly females, as I do most often, makeup has a big bearing on how attention grabbing those eyes can be. So make sure that your makeup artist knows that. Make sure that the eye makeup is done well. Now, a lot of my subjects do their own makeup, so it's not particularly perfect, but it doesn't take away too much. But eye makeup can really make a big difference. You don't want to overdo it. Depending on the style of the image you're shooting, whether it's more natural or more high fashion. But find a makeup artist who knows the importance of those eyes, and that blending that makeup around the eye is a really important thing. One other thing that can really work well in attracting attention to your subject's eyes is to lift them higher in the frame. The higher the eyes are in the frame, the more impact they tend to have. Look at these images. When we shoot the image with the eyes closer to the center of the frame, it tends to look a bit boring. It tends to look a bit less exciting. But when we chop their head off a little bit and move those eyes up higher in the frame, they have so much more impact. They really grab you. Look at a lot of fashion magazines, particularly makeup ads or face portraits. You'll see that head's chopped off a little bit. Don't do it for everything, but to move those eyes up higher in the frame will give them more impact and make them stand out more. Now, I tend to like most of my subjects to look down the lens of the camera so that the viewer is grabbed, their attention is grabbed by that person looking straight at them. It doesn't mean that I don't shoot shots looking away from the camera. You may prefer that as well, and that gives a different sort of a feel to the image. It's a less personal sort of an image when that happens. If I want my subject to look away from the camera, I don't say look to the left or look to the right, because chances are she's going to go like this or like this, and I'm going to get too much whites in those eyes and it's just not going to look good. I use my hand so that I can precisely gauge the eye line of my subject. I'll say just look here, look where my hand is. If I want them to look above the camera, I'll hold my hand above my head and I'll say look where my hand is, so that I can actually move around and change their eye line to the way that I can see through the viewfinder that it looks best. So try to do that if you can. When I've got my subject looking away, I try not to get their eyes turned too far away from the camera, because I'm going to get too much whites in the eyes. I'll either get them to look straight ahead where their nose is, or I'll just ask them to turn their eyes back to the camera. I don't want them to turn their face so far that it's really hard for them to look around. I need to make it comfortable for them. So I'll just say, just turn your face back far enough so it's comfortable to look towards the camera. When you do ask someone to look away from the camera, it's nice to compose your image with a little bit of negative space in here. If I'm here in the frame and I'm looking out of the frame like that, it doesn't look quite as good than if I'm further back here and I'm looking back towards that negative space. It gives me something to look into. It makes the shot look a bit more believable. So do that. Leave that space, that negative space in front of your subject if you want to, if it looks good. All of these things are personal choice, obviously, but this tends to be the way that I work. The last point I want to cover is editing eyes. I try not to edit eyes at all if I can. If I light them properly and if they look good in the original image, in the straight out of camera image, I leave them alone. Maybe I might do a couple of edits on veins that might be obvious in the eye, particularly if it's a really close-up. But other than that, I stay away, because we look at eyes so often through the day of various different people that we're talking to. So if we do manipulate those eyes, it can look really unnatural very quickly. So be very careful if you do edit eyes. I tend not to do it if I can help it, as I said, but it's up to you. Don't go too far though. The best edit is the one you don't notice. Okay, so hopefully you've learned a little bit more in this video about shooting eyes in an image and the importance of the eyes in an image. Please try these techniques, play around with them, take what suits you out of this video. You don't have to follow everything and be a clone of me, but the more you can pay attention to those eyes and the importance of those eyes in the image, the more successful your photographs will tend to be. I'll see you next time.